عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. جزاك الله خير أخي عمار. جزاكم الله خير أخواتي إخواني. أحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى وأصلي وأسلم على عبده ونبيه ورسوله محمد. اللهم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم واغفر لنا إنك أنت الغفور الرحيم. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وقلبا خاشعا ولسانا ذاكرا وعملا متقبلا ودعاء مسموعا ونجاة من النار وفوزا بالجنة. وإذا أردت بقوم فتنة فاقبضنا إليك غير مفتونين. The holy name of Allah, Al-Azeez subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the subject of this conversation tonight. And I would like to emphasize that I'm sure in the beginning or in the introduction of this series of Al-Asma Al-Husna, the most beautiful names of Allah, whoever introduced this series, he mentioned to you the hadith about the blessing, the greatest blessing of knowing إن لله 99 اسما من أحصاها دخل الجنة. So we're talking about something that is, if you know these names, 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, 100 إلا واحد, 100 except one. So we're talking about 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? If you know them and you act upon this knowledge, what you get Al-Jannah. Man ahsaha dakhala Al-Jannah. This is the hadith on the excellence of knowing and acting upon this beautiful knowledge of Al-Asma Al-Husna. What is the meaning of Al-Azeez? Al-Azeez is the one whose power is so overwhelming that nothing can resist it. Again, the one whose power is so might and overwhelming that nothing and nobody can resist it. In other words, this power, of course we're referring to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, His power is overwhelming. And not just that it is overwhelming, it overpowers, right, anybody and anything else. And especially the ones who try to oppose or resist it. This overwhelming power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, crushes and renders whoever opposes to it, render him or her or it powerless, helpless, and ineffective. This name, Al-Azeez, in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is mentioned in the book of Allah, Al-Quran Kareem, over 80 times. Over 80 times. I have noticed, again, Al-Azeez, and please remember the name, because I'm going to mention it in Arabic during this talk. Al-Azeez and Al-Izza. Al-Izza is the adjective, right? Which is the action or the noun, I should say. Al-Izza, Al-Azeez. Now, the name Al-Azeez I just mentioned to you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in His book more than 80 times. Now, what I noticed that, subhanAllah, over half of these times, over half of these places where Allah mentioned His name Al-Azeez, 45 of those places, Allah associated and combined Al-Azeez with another name of His. You know what that name is? Al-Hakim. Jazakallahu khair. What does that say? And this is very significant, by the way. This is very important to understand. Allah's name Al-Hakim is associated in almost 45 of these locations where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, over half of these locations where Allah mentioned His name Al-Azeez. To tell you that His might, this overwhelming power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a wise and right and just. So whenever it works and wherever it works, Allah has overwhelming might and power. It is based on hikmah, wisdom. And you know, his wisdom means the right thing, the right judgment, right? Remember this. So when Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy hit, I wanted to refer to these mighty natural phenomena of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a manifestation of Allah's might and overwhelming power. Remember, this might and this overwhelming power was just and wise. How this is something will need and will require like some time to explain, but I'm sure I'm gonna trust your wisdom and your knowledge to think about this. Allah's might, overwhelming power, is based and works, right, based on the law of hikmah, the law of wisdom. Also, another observation, by the way, I found in the Quran, over 15 times, this name Al-Azeez is combined with Ar-Rahim as well. So it is not just only that Allah's overwhelming power, Al-Izzah, is just and wise, it is even more. It is kind and merciful. And this is what Ar-Rahim means, subhanallah. Al-Azeez, Ar-Rahim, both together, in 15 times, right in the Quran. It is not only Allah's power and might. It is kind and merciful. It's not just wise. It is kind and merciful. And this is another thing that needs clarification and explanation. I don't have time for this now because I have very limited time. Now, just to mention to you some examples of Allah's overwhelming power. I'm going to remind you of some of these examples. As you read throughout the Quran, I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Sayyidina Ibrahim. To show you some examples in the history of the prophets with the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? You see here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah's overwhelming power, Allah's izzah, right? Working in place and in effect. Now, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wassalam, when they decided to burn him alive. You remember the story, right? Without going into the details. Now, they lit this huge, maybe biggest fire ever known in back then. And then they chained Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, and they cast him into this huge blazing fire. This is the might of the fire that we all know. It burns and crushes everything that is in it. Right? Now, but there is an overwhelming power that crushes the most overwhelming power that we know of. It is the overwhelming power and izzah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sayyidina Ibrahim was thrown into the fire, and Allah's izzah interfered, right? And stopped this mighty fire from burning Sayyidina Ibrahim. This is mentioned in the Quran. If it was not mentioned in the Quran, we would doubt it, right? Definitely would doubt it. The fire, huge fire, does not burn. And Sayyidina Ibrahim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded. This is where Allah is mighty. Allah's might and power, right? That overpowers any other power and force. Allah commanded the fire, Kuni bardan wa salaman ala Ibrahim. Allahu Akbar. And the fire obeyed and submitted to Allah's overwhelming izzah, right? Sayyidina Ibrahim came out of the fire without, I don't think there is even a trace of smoke on his clothes. Cool, comfortable, and safe. The nar, the fire, what happened to its power and might? Allah's izzah is over all, right? And defeats any other power. Another example, Sayyidina Nuh, even before Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, right? What happened when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to punish the rejectors, the enemies of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, the ones who rejected Allah's message, the ones who rejected Allah's Rasul, Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. What happened? Allah decided to drown, right, the whole population, and actually the whole world became like a huge sea. Waters rain poured down from the sky. Waters poured out from the ground, right? Rivers overflew, subhanallah, and waters, waves of waters covered and covered the mountains, covered the hills, covered the mountains. The mountains, huge mountains, disappeared and sank out of sight. Subhanallah. And you remember the story of the son of Sayyidina Nuh, right? When he said, no, I'm going to go up on the top of this mountain and I will be saved. And وَحَالَ بَيْنَهُمَا الْمَوْجُ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْمُغْرَقِينَ. Where are you going, right? Where are you going? Go wherever. Go. He went on the top of this huge mountain, but what happened? The waves of the water drowned. He was drowned, right? And he was taken out, and he was crushed and destroyed, and he was forgotten, and he was crushed. So this is another example of Allah's might and overwhelming power. Another example, we know Sayyidina Ibrahim, Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. There are many examples that you know. The king in Surah Al-Buruj. Remember that story as well, where they tried to kill the boy, right? The boy and the king. You know the story. What happened? Different attempts to kill the boy, but they all failed. Because, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they took him to the top of the mountain. They decided to throw him out of the mountain, but subhanallah, the mountain shook and the boy came back to the king. And there are many examples. Sayyidina Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, right? When he left in the hijrah, in the story of the hijrah, he left his house. They were there in front of the door, right? They were there, and they could not see Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam leaving the house. He left from the door. He didn't leave from the roof. He didn't leave from any other door, because his house had only one door, and they couldn't see him. While he was hiding in the cave, what happened? They reached there. They reached there to the entrance of the cave. They could not see him because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prevented their sight from reaching him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent angels, and the angels were like screening Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. On his way, they pursued Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Suraqa ibn Malik pursued him. What happened to Suraqa? He was on the top of his on the back of his horse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stopped the horse, and he again eventually submitted to Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he became Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam promised him, as you all know, gave him security. We know from Sayyidina Musa's story. Sayyidina Musa, you all familiar with Sayyidina Musa's story. Fir'aun pursued Sayyidina Musa and the children of Israel, his people, right? And when they reached the Red Sea, what happened? Now you see another show of Allah's izzah, right? Another illustration of Allah's izzah. What happened? The might of the sea, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divided the sea, and the sea split into two halves. Each one of them is like a huge mountain, firm and standing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created a path during this water, a path. They could walk, and they walked. Sayyidina Musa leading his people, right? And they were delivered to the other side. When Fir'aun and over like 70,000 of his forces and his people, his troops, right? They followed them. What happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the sea to drown all of them and to destroy and to crush Fir'aun and his army. You see, here's another example where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's overwhelming power and izzah works and succeeds. This is the name of the izzah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to do, no one can resist, overpower, overcome Allah's izzah or Allah's power. In the end, I would like you to understand this. As we know of Allah's izzah, and we know that Allah is Al-Azeez, what does that mean to us today as Muslims, as believers? You know, the most important thing that we learn from Allah's izzah, or we get from Allah's izzah, is that we as mu'mineen, we should be actually, as a result of believing in Allah's izzah and His overwhelming might and power, we, the Muslims, should be the strongest people of the whole world. Because your Rabb, your God, is the one who is Al-Azeez. Why would you fear anybody else, any force on the face of earth? The Muslim, the mu'min, should be the greatest, the most courageous person, because you're counting on, you're trusting on, you are believing on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whose might and power is irresistible, and nobody can defeat it. Nobody, nothing. So this izzah gives you this great feeling of strength, right? That's why I'm saying you should be the strongest human being. You should be the strongest person, morally, right? Morally. Because you know your Lord is Al-Azeez. And if your Lord, right, your most beloved dear God is Al-Azeez, why would you be afraid? Why would you be afraid of any power, any force? You see, this is one of the greatest, actually, qualities that the mu'min should possess as a result of his iman, his faith in Allah's izzah. This is so beautiful. This is so strong, right? And this sense of security that we get, this sense of security, because you know that your friend is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're the friend of Allah. You're the wali of Allah. So you have this, right? I'm sorry. With this, I end. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those people who believe in His izzah and who act based on this, who become and be all the time, be the strongest people no matter what happens, no matter what challenges you're facing. Your Lord is Al-Azeez, right? And you should be brave and you should be courageous, right? And not fear anybody or any force. This is just a reminder of how important this name is. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make of all of us, of the people who appreciate these names and act upon the knowledge of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa sallim tasliman kathira. Thank you very, very much.